If you don't mind now, I would like to pass the moderation, the moderator of this next phase of the event, dear friend Chris Fernando, that had the hard work of putting this wonderful team together that I'm going to present this afternoon or this morning in the US. So Chris, I do not have a short introduction. So if you don't mind introducing yourself, and then I know you have the intros for everyone else that follows, would you please take the baton? I'll sit back, and if you need anything, just let me know. At this point, it's all yours.
Okay, there you go. So I think we're waiting on a couple more panelists, so I'll get started with my introduction. Thank you, Carlos. Good morning, everyone in Portugal, as well as in the United States. I should say good afternoon to those of you in Portugal. It's a pleasure to join you virtually. Would love to be there in person. Of course, as Carlos mentioned, hopefully next year things will be different and we can enjoy the warm weather, good wine, good food, and hospitality of the people in Portugal. My name is Chris Fernando. Yes, I have a Portuguese last name. And I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a principal at Quantitative Scientific Solutions, which is an organization that supports the U.S. government with various research efforts in biotechnology, data analytics, transportation, and aviation. I've been in the aviation business for almost 20 years, and in the airport space for quite a bit of that, and most recently supporting several efforts in unmanned systems and urban air mobility. But today is not about me. It's about this amazing panel that we have. We have 4 of the 5 speakers on, so I think we have quorum. Hopefully Justin joins us shortly. But I will give you a quick overview of how we're going to do things today for the next hour and 15 minutes, and try our best to stay on time. But we have very quickly, they will introduce themselves in more detail, but I have the honor and privilege of moderating this panel made up of Michel Schwartz, who is the Chief Corporate Strategy and Affairs Officer at Los Angeles World Airports, David Smith, Director of Energy Programs from Burns Engineering, Purnima Thakre, who is the CEO of Refine and Focus, Justin Tolles, who I hope will join soon. He's a Senior Policy Advisor from Aiken Gump. And last but not least, Claddy Singh, who's the General Manager of Innovation and Federal Services at Akita Box. So the format for the next hour and a quarter will be each of the speakers will have approximately 5 to 6 minutes to introduce themselves. I've encouraged them to not be shy and talk a little bit about themselves so that you all get to know them. And then also really talk about their experience in the industry. It's a diverse group in makeup in terms of capability, experience, and I think you will benefit from their words and the time over the next hour and quarter. And then so that should last about 30 minutes. And then the next 30 minutes, there will be a panel discussion. Hopefully that will generate questions from you all. And the last 15 minutes, we will do a Q&A with all of you, and hopefully answer as many questions as we can before wrapping up. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Michelle to kick things off for the next 5 or 6 minutes to give us an intro and talk about her experience and airport perspective of how innovation and sustainability play a role in her day-to-day job. Over to you, Michelle.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. Good afternoon to everybody over in Europe. Good morning to those in the US. I should be watching the sunrise here in California as we get underway this morning. So again, I'm Michel Schwartz, Chief Corporate Strategy and Affairs Officer at Los Angeles World Airports. We are the department of the City of Los Angeles that owns and operates both Los Angeles International Airport, or LAX, and Van Nuys General Aviation Airport. And in that role, I get to oversee our corporate-wide strategy and policy, innovation, technology, and guest experience, as well as our engagement with all of our stakeholders, from airlines to government to media and many more. Prior to moving to Los Angeles a few years ago, I spent most of my career in Washington, D.C., working for the federal government. I was honored to be appointed by President Obama as Chief of Staff at the Federal Aviation Administration, where I coordinated the rollout of the world's first comprehensive regulation for integrating small unmanned aircraft systems into the National Airspace System, and also helped to establish the Drone Advisory Committee. I previously spent many years working in the United States Senate, including working for now Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer. And on a personal note, I am a surfer, and I have surfed in Portugal, though not on the big waves. But I am therefore very much hopeful to be in Portugal next year and wish that we were there right now. So I want to just touch briefly on 3 themes of innovation and sustainability, all of which have been demonstrated just in the past week at LAX. So the first is that innovation and sustainability are integral to the guest experience. Our Board of Airport Commissioners approved 3 items last week that demonstrate this theme. First, they approved a contract for us to develop a smart parking system that will allow for contactless reservation and payment and innovations in wayfinding as well. And equally as exciting, it will allow for the installation of more than 1,250 electric vehicle chargers, which will be the largest integrated EV charging installation at any U.S. airport. They also approved the first phase of biometric boarding gates, or e-gates, at our Tom Bradley International Terminal, which builds on our history as the first U.S. airport with e-gates. And they approved the beginning of a development of a remote bag drop system that we hope to put in place at the new ground transportation center and new consolidated rental car facility that we're building. We also saw last week that innovation and sustainability require partnerships. Ampere, which is a company that is being sponsored by our LA Clean Tech Incubator, announced last week that their 6-seat electric wheel aircraft completed a 341-mile flight. And they've said that that was the longest flight to date for a commercially relevant aircraft using electric propulsion. And so we look forward to soon welcoming a flight from Ampere at LAX or Van Nuys. We want to see that come soon. And just last night, we submitted an application to the FAA to participate in their UAS detection and mitigation test program. And so that is another partnership that we are very eager to engage in. And finally, the theme that I saw in this past week is that diversity and inclusion are prerequisites to innovation. Today, our Business, Jobs, and Social Responsibility team, which I also oversee, is conducting an inclusivity training for all of our divisions throughout Los Angeles World Airports. And this is going to be implementing a new policy whereby we will be scoring inclusivity on every single one of our procurements. Because we understand that a key aspect of innovation is bringing in different perspectives and understanding that no race, gender, or ethnicity has a monopoly on great ideas. So with that, I will finish my introduction. Thank you all. I'm very excited to engage in discussion with my fellow panelists this morning.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Lots of exciting things happening in LA. And like you said, hopefully we'll be out there surfing next year in Portugal. LA too, but prefer Portugal, I think. So next in line, at least on my screen, is David Smith. So David, again, the Director of Energy Programs at Burns Engineering. He's gonna actually touch on, Michelle touched a little bit on the innovation piece, and David will talk about energy, which is touching on the sustainability piece. So David, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris, and good morning to everyone on this side of the pond, and happy afternoon to those in Europe. My name is David Smith, and I am Director of Energy at Burns Engineering. We are a leading engineering and consulting firm at the intersection of energy resilience, sustainability, and power grid optimization. I'm grateful today for the opportunity to participate in this event and be able to talk about the coming energy paradigm shift and how it will impact airports. It's something I have a lot of passion for. And I can trace that passion all the way back to high school when the oil embargoes were happening and energy was starting to be disrupted for the first time in the century. In college, I studied petroleum-based economies, and my graduate degree is in energy management and policy. My career began after graduate school when I joined a small company that was focused on highly efficient residential retrofits and new home construction. The methodology we used was developed at Princeton University and was based on thermographic analysis, also known as infrared scanning, and air pressure testing of building envelopes. It's not an overstatement to say that that methodology and the work we did there went on to change how homes were both built and retrofitted for energy efficiency in the U.S. About 20 years ago, I started my own firm and began to focus on larger commercial, industrial, institutional facilities, campuses. And our goal was to combine energy efficiency and really drive down the energy usage and add on to that on-site energy generation so that we could really drive energy usage and carbon emissions and energy costs down. Fast forward 13 years, I sold my firm and was hired by Burns to create and lead the energy group. At Burns, among other things, I've consulted to the U.S. Department of Energy and participated in the Obama administration's U.S.-China climate change initiative, where I was part of the Smart Grid, Microgrid workshop working group. We work with U.S. and Chinese experts on technology, best practices, cost-benefit methodologies, and developed a number of different strategies around all of those. Other Department of Energy assignments have been to advise Lawrence Berkeley Lab, the National Lab, on its microgrid optimization software tool, and to sort of test drive that out in the field on microgrid projects that we were working on. As a company, Burns has focused primarily on two areas. First is energy resilience, and we've been doing that in the form of microgrids and on-site generation. And for those who don't know, microgrids provide power to a group of connected loads that can be operated connected to the grid or can be separated from the grid in the event of power outages, be they short or protracted. So some relevant examples of our work for airports include a microgrid assessment, preliminary design, and technical evaluation for Atlanta Airport. That happened in the wake of the 2017 outage event that really disrupted the global air system. particularly in North America. And we have done similar work for Denver Airport, Pittsburgh, JFK. And that work has evolved into other assignments and ongoing engagements with those airports as they look to increase their resilience. Each of these airports have different issues and challenges. In some cases, it's not possible to get enough power for some of the growth that's anticipated. In some cases, the power outages are problematic and really result in disruption to the entire airport. Even with a small power outage, you can have to restart all your vertical conveyances and all your baggage systems and your ticketing. So a small outage can really make for big consequences. We're also designing the largest microgrid in the world, so that's kind of an oxymoron. It's the so-called transit grid. It's 140 megawatt power plant and distribution grid to keep trains operating to and from northern New Jersey and into Manhattan. In total, we've been involved in more than 50 resilient and sustainable energy projects and amounting to more than 500 megawatts of distributed energy resources. Our second area of focus at Burns is something I'm really excited about and very much engaged with going forward strategically, and that is beneficial or strategic electrification. The idea that in the face of climate disruption and all the changes that are occurring and impacts related thereto, we have to shift away from fossil fuels for transportation and building heating, and instead really rely on clean, renewable sourced electricity, whether it be from the grid, large solar, large wind, or from on-site power generation, rooftop solar, hydrogen fuel cells, battery storage. All these different technologies are being brought to bear and making it possible to really transition operations of all sorts of facilities, including airports, to increasingly use electric. But that conversion of fleets, buildings, campuses, airports to be fully electric, while it's essential if we're going to combat climate change, will be anything but easy. The good news, I think, is that it can be done. The grid is getting greener. More and more renewables are coming online at scale onto the grid. Green power is getting cheaper. In many cases, it's cheaper than brown power, if you will. And in some cases, there's more of it being produced than countries even require at a given day or time. So I know Portugal is, I recall, as overproduced on renewable energy and had more than it could use, as has Germany and some other European countries. We're not there yet, but that's the goal. As we go down this path, it's going to be essential to ensure power reliability, resilience, power quality. So naturally, if we're converting entirely to electric, we've got to really be sure that single source dependency is obviously a critical point of failure if not addressed. The good news, I think, also is that there's a lot of private capital wanting to go to work helping public entities achieve this new energy reality, and that's got a lot of benefits I'll talk about in terms of shifting risk and leveraging expertise and operating capabilities to private entities. We're seeing a lot of that in the U.S. Energy as a service, that idea, where you're not paying for the capital cost up front, you're paying over the time you use the energy. So it feels like we're in a race against time these next 2 decades. The challenge is to fundamentally rethink the fuels and energy systems and infrastructure that have made the modern, comfortable world we live in possible. And we don't have a lot of time given the magnitude of the challenge. So I'm excited to talk about beneficial electrification, how it will impact airports, what the next 2 decades look like, and hear what other panelists have to say as we discuss innovation more broadly. So thanks for the opportunity to be here, Chris, and the organizers. I'm excited to participate.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, looking forward to the discussion in a few minutes. So next up is Claddy Singh. GM of Innovation and Federal Services at Akita Box. Claddy, don't know if your camera is on, but you're on. Oh, you're up, I should say.
Hopefully you can see me. I can see myself, but okay. Great. So thank you, Chris, and good day to everyone. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Claddy Singh. I am the head of innovation and our federal solutions practice at Akita Box, where we are focused on facility management software and technologies to better service and create business intelligence for facilities. And what I'd like to do today is talk about the role that establishing a culture of innovation and working with federal customers here in the U.S. to build solutions, how that has led to this journey to date where now I'm at Akita Box. So I've been a consultant, quote unquote, problem solver for the past 18 plus years. And 12 of which were spent at Booz Allen Hamilton, a management consulting firm where myself and Chris and others were really leading sort of innovative technology and change adoption across the federal government. And so, while I was there, we were leading teams that were supporting legacy programs and portfolios for the DoD around infrastructure management, facilities, real estate, around built and natural infrastructure, environment, and energy. And in doing that work, year over year, the way that we approached it is, is there a better and faster way to do this, right? We shouldn't be doing it the same way, even though that's the tradition, that's the legacy, that's the program, and how it's been conducted. And so really it was this curiosity and this commitment within our functional and market team to really explore and exploit that. And so we started paying attention to, at the time, drones coming on the market, commercially available drones, AI becoming more widely available, as well as AR and VR technologies and digital solution strategies. And at the same time, Booz Allen Corporate was standing up an innovation group across the enterprise. So we knew that our compass was set right, as a market and functional team on exploring this. And so we started looking at, drones and, in particular, and there's different ways to explore innovation. Ours, as Michel touched upon, was really about partnerships, right? Creating partnerships with technology companies, service providers, small and large. And one of the ones was Precision Hawk, which is where I continued on my journey to go to Precision Hawk after Booz Allen. And we really dialed in on, not just in the curiosity of really thinking about how do we use drones? It's not as simple as throwing a drone up in the air. It's much more complex in the operational environment to make sure that you're doing it safely and securely without introducing risks to the people and the environment that you're operating on top of. And so we looked at flights and sensors and prescriptions and how do you fly this complex airspace in airports and campuses and installations. And the best way to do it is to do these pilot projects, right? So pilot initiatives to rapid prototype and deploy these different prescriptions we were putting together. And two particular pilot projects that we had done that I'd like to highlight is at VA West LA campus, so close to where Michel is, where we supported a master plan EIS and looked at the trees as part of the NEPA assessment, the EIS, and inventoried and looked at all the different tree species types as well as the horizontal infrastructure using drones and AI and the condition of that horizontal infrastructure. And developed the first of kind, a visual, electronic, digital NEPA, which is really revolutionary. And really the time that we were in the field, which was roughly about 2.5, 3 days compared to a multi-person team for 6+ weeks with clipboards in hand counting, was, I think, a transformation in how it could be done, right, by demonstrating that capability being applied. And then I think that innovation gene just infected where now the VA is really thinking about LiDAR and sensor technologies and drones as part of their tool set, to do this across other campuses. The other pilot was at Tinker Air Force Base, which an Air Force Base is essentially a very large airport. And we looked at, not only the platforms and how to fly, but looking at the sensors, the hardware and the software, and working with the OEMs to identify all the threat vectors that were presented with its intended application. And we developed the mitigation strategies and created the due diligence up front with the pre-planning and coordination to fly them safely. And as a result of that, secured the first DoD waiver through the OSD DoD waiver process for a contractor-owned and operated drone to fly in restricted airspace over an Air Force base. So a huge success, for the partnership team there. And that also developed a common risk assessment framework to identify all the cybersecurity vulnerabilities that, in fact, all commercial drones should be subject to understand any vulnerabilities that present themselves and how to harden these platforms for their intended applications for government use. And so that journey brings me here to Akita Box, where I've been here for about 8 months now, where we're very focused on the facility management side and the building envelope as well as campus-wide views, and looking at all different infrastructure types across the infrastructure lifecycle, from planning to design optimization and fortifying to the construction, the turnover, the O&M, as well as, to the end of life, of the asset where you recap, divest, or decommission. And I'd like to say, Michelle, you touched upon this. I feel like this is a very interesting and exciting time where I've seen the best collaborations happening and change happening, where government, industry, technology partners are coming together to advance these types of applications, right? And putting money, where that is, and creating fusion cells and innovation teams and incubators, right, to really rapid that and accelerate that, that evaluation and the procurement. And you talked a little bit about this, but seeing that change where it is incentivizing innovations being applied, right, instead of past performance, the way traditional procurements were, and the evaluation criteria changing. So this all, I think, helps, culminate innovation. And so here we are at Akita Box now, where we are now embarking on supporting Base of the Future at Tyndall Air Force Base, which is a huge rebuild and recovery effort. And if anyone knows, that's at Panama City, Florida, and they were absolutely decimated by hurricane events recently. And there was a multi-billion-dollar rebuild effort, and we are going to be supporting the first of a digital twin to really look at, optimizing the resilience and hardness of the new to be constructed infrastructure there. And so that's exciting, to use drones and AI and remote sensing, ground-based technologies to support that. And then with the FAA, we're supporting the use of drones for infrastructure inspections. So we're going to be going to airports to fly drones safely and security in different class airspace, B through D, and creating the playbook so that you have an operational plan of how to do this across at every airport and rinse and repeat, and do it safely and securely with the communication deconfliction protocol and the planning that's needed to conduct these in a valuable way. So in closing, I'd just like to say that I'm excited to see these demonstrated innovations and creating the culture of collaboration and innovation. And I just want to see more of that, right? Interagency collaboration, government, technology companies, and private companies collaborating. And doing more of this, for not only on a national scale that we're seeing in the U.S., but this, where we are exchanging ideas on a global front and, exchanging that. So I hope some of the concepts discussed here today will actually be applied and we talk about them next year in person, or at least that's what we're hoping for. So thanks, Chris. Over to you.
Thanks, Claddy. I'm going to do a little bit of translation for those of you in Europe. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, and EIS is the contact statement. So I'm going to be moderating and be a glossary of acronyms during the course of the next hour. So I will hand off, which is a great segue, to Purnima, who is the CEO of Refine and Focus, one of the great collaborators and relationship builders that I know, and a friend. So Purnima, over to you. I think you're on mute.
That's
Okay.
the coolest thing about, our phase in life right now. It's like we say something really impressive and, oh, you're on mute. So thank you, Chris. And you are so right. You're absolutely right that, it was like whatever things Claddy talked about, she opened the door for things that I want to talk about, because innovation is a combination of, it's a combination of human and technology. You need to do a lot of things, but a lot of those things come from a mindset. And I am going to talk about the human side of innovation and the mindset of innovation. So to introduce myself, my name is Purnima Thakre, and I co-lead Refine and Focus, a Boston-based and working globally innovation firm. And we have worked with companies and organizations of all sizes and in all industries, multiple industries. When I was preparing for this talk, I went over a few things and I was surprised. And I realized that I started my innovation career. My first project was in aerospace. It was Bombardier, and I had completely forgotten about it. And thank you. So thank you for this talk. And in addition to a lot of brands, we have also helped a lot of nonprofit organizations, of the size of United Nations, Habitat, and similar. We have also worked with countries. And so I completely understand when Claddy is talking about collaboration within industries. What makes us powerful innovation partners or innovation experts is because we work in multiple industries, is because, we have experience, we bring experience from one industry to another industry. And obviously over, past, my personal introduction is my undergrad was in architecture, so I can call myself an architect. I'm an architect with an MBA with a Master's of Finance. So I proudly always say that my left and right side of my brain are completely balanced and always active. And that is what is, that is the power of innovation. I feel like all of us have that power in us, that we are, since our childhood, we are told the stories that, you're good at numbers, you can't be good with words, but that's not true. And that's the power of innovation that it does to us, that it activates all parts of our brains and helps us grow in the areas that we never thought we were capable of growing. So going back to, I am talking specifically about business innovation, not tech innovation. And in my head, business innovation is like cooking in many ways. It's not like baking. If there are any cooks or bakers in here, you know the difference, that cooking is art and science, and baking is complete science. In cooking, you go on making things on a smaller scale and go on testing them, repeating them. Every time you do a recipe, you do it better than the last time. Also, in cooking, everybody thinks they can cook. Everybody thinks they can innovate. They know how to innovate, but very few are the chefs, and even fewer make money out of it. And in a nutshell, that's how innovation is. It's easier to, because, it has been made so simple. All of us think that we can do it, but it's very difficult to actually do it correctly and do it like a master. So I'm going to, obviously I have worked in innovation for somewhere or the other. I have worked for last 20 years. I have touched upon innovation, and I have learned many lessons from multiple industries. And I am going to share with you 5 key ingredients that you must have in your innovation kitchen. And those 5 key ingredients, in my opinion, are the ones which differentiate between successful serial innovators and failures or one-time innovators. You might have heard this question many a times or wondered yourself many a times, that why some innovations are so wonderful. Some companies can innovate consistently while others fail. And these 5 things that I'm going to tell you are the reasons behind it. And, I have, so the first one I would talk about is the culture of openness and forgiveness. When you say, very bluntly, you say fail hard and fail fast and all those things, those are great slogans. At the same time, that's a mindset. And that mindset comes from an organization that where your organization needs to be designed in such a way that there is an openness for forgiveness. People don't have fear of making decisions. People don't have fear of taking actions. That was the first one, the openness and forgiveness. The second one, Claddy, you touched upon this one, which is no silos. You were talking about how we can collaborate and how we can learn from each other. So these silos, think of any silos that you have, either vertical silos in your organization, horizontal hierarchy in your organization, or outside of your organization, industrial silos. Very recently, we have seen that industries that have learned from each other have grown really fast, and industries that could not learn from each other, although they were tech advanced, they couldn't really make their technology useful to people. And that's the important part. It's not just about technology, it's also about people. Or, in my head, it's a lot about people, but I'm trying to be unbiased here today. So the third one, we are on the third one. The companies which do innovations really well, they have in their teams, everyone is an outsider. Now, what does that mean? Everyone is an outsider? Because outsiderness is of different things. And Michel, you touched upon this one, and Claddy, you too, which is you need diversity of gender, diversity of race, diversity of skill set, diversity of mindset, diversity of ideas, diversity of backgrounds, experiences, because diversity is where innovation grows. If you try to solve the problem exactly same way you have been solving for last 100 years, you're not going to get new answers. You're going to get exactly same answers if you solve it the same way. If you solve it in a different way with different people, you're going to get different answers. The fourth one, you need to have environment that generates curiosity and learning. This also goes back to, not having that environment of rah, 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 I'm right, where people are forced to say that I'm right, or where people are forced to be right all the time. You need to have a judgment-free zone where people, where people listen to each other. People are curious to know about each other. People love to learn and grow alongside each other in something that all of us are doing right now. And the last one is about investment. Thankfully, when we talk about investment in innovation, it doesn't have to be huge investment. It needs to be consistent investment. You need to decide what is it that you're investing and keep on investing it no matter what the results are in initial phases. You cannot make a huge investment and suddenly take back that investment if you failed at your first attempt. Everybody knows that innovations do not succeed in the first attempt. You could fail initially, but that doesn't mean you should take away the whatever resources, whatever investment, which could be, investment of people, investment of money, investment of time, whatever it is, don't take it back. Keep it there, and you will get the results if you have all the rest of the 4 items in place. So if you were with me and if you were thinking whether your organization has this, whether you have it personally or not, and if your answer was no for any one of these, we need to talk. We need to talk, and you can ask me any questions during rest of the time today, or you can, feel free to reach out to me anywhere. LinkedIn is the best way to reach, and I will help you figure it out, whether it is in 30 minutes conversation or in 3 months of conversation. But we will figure it out, and each one of us have that capacity of building that innovation muscle. And like everyone else around this table, I really want this world to be a better place, and innovation can make that happen. And when I say better place, I'm not saying from, that I am saying from the point of view that all problems are solved, but everyone is also happy, healthy, and has enough resources for themselves, including us. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And I hope, Chris, I didn't take more than my time because I got
This is great. Thank you, Purnima. And I was taking notes. Every time I talk to you or listen to you, I feel like I'm always taking notes, which is Gladdy and I have great conversations. But we tend to think the same way, whereas with you, I'm always writing stuff down because it's always new to me. So very exciting, and looking forward to picking your brain further in the conversation. And then last but not least, we do have Justin Tolles, who is a senior policy advisor at Aiken Gump, which is a law firm. Great, strong background in airports and drones and government. So, Justin, I don't know if you can turn on your camera, but you're up.
Yes. Sorry, it says my camera is on. So my apologies if you can't see me.
Now we can.
Just reset it. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Anyway, thank you so much, Chris, and to the other great speakers. I appreciate the opportunity. As you mentioned, I'm a leader in the advanced aviation practice at Aiken Gump. We're a large policy and advocacy and law firm with offices across, all over the world, but I'm based in the Washington, D.C. office. There at Aiken Gump, we work on a number of problems, but before that, I had a company called Ascension Global, which is a management consulting firm where we focused on basically urban air mobility, so air taxis, air metro, UAS integration, electrification of aircraft. Sold that company, and that is now part of the Hyundai's air mobility unit. And before that, I represented airports. So that's kind of the linkage here. I was the vice president of regulatory and legislative affairs at the American Association of Airport Executives, where really is where I kind of started getting into these kind of advanced aviation areas such as urban air mobility and unmanned aircraft systems. Before that, I had a long and winding road in politics. Through working on Capitol Hill, governor's office, a lot of political campaigns, which I'm heavily involved in one right now. So that kind of brings me to the idea of what I'll be talking about is not only airport innovation and how that links up with sustainability, but how that kind of is driven by policy. And you really need to have that background, that basis and foundation in order to move forward. So whenever you talk, there's so many times when I've seen, companies have great ideas to push forward new technology, or airports also, are trying to be innovative and very nimble, where that kind of, hits some of the policy hurdles. Now, example of that is, a couple of years ago, as we're working towards a more sustainable, aviation system. We had performance-based navigation being implemented across the country, and still do. But at that time, there was one example in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona, in the United States, where we moved to a system that created a lot more efficiency. But overnight, outside of Phoenix, the change in those routes basically sent calls from the public to the mayor's office and to the airport from 100 a year to 4,000 in a month. And that is the kind of impact where the public and the community and different stakeholders can really have a massive impact on sustainability and other innovation efforts. So it's critically important to kind of build that base, and realize that that includes engaging community stakeholders, industry stakeholders, elected officials, members of the public, and really understand that politics is a part of this overall system. And I think that's one of the things that's super important. And some of the projects that we've been working on are really surrounding urban air mobility. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about how that's played a major factor. So urban air mobility, for those who aren't familiar, is kind of the concept of moving people and cargo via unmanned, autonomous, most likely electric VTOL aircraft. So this will probably be centered around urban areas, at least at first, and then kind of expand from there. Right now, we have over 200 companies across the world that are developing some type of eVTOL aircraft for use in urban air mobility or advanced air mobility. And so it's super exciting. And really, this is where I think this kind of new tech industry, the UAS industry, is going to explode in this area. And logically, one of the first areas for this to really take hold is at an airport. For a number of reasons. Number one, you have the aviation experience and the infrastructure there. You have the digital infrastructure, all of the airspace type of infrastructure there, the experience, the know-how, and then you have the people. So and you really want areas where you have a high demand market to bring people from transportation hubs such as an airport, maybe in many cases what it is 10, 20 miles down to a city center. So I think it's a very logical place for urban air mobility systems to take an early foothold, and we need to be prepared for that. And so one of the projects I did for a major OEM, a global OEM recently, was to try to put together a 5-year roadmap for what the policy would look like for that, and how do you harmonize that across the world. So actually went on a around the world trip and visited a number of cities, talked to local stakeholders, city governments, national government CAAs across the world, industry stakeholders, all the way down to metropolitan planning organizations here in the United States, and tried to get an idea of what we need to do to build that system so that we have that regulatory foundation so we don't have a bottleneck eventually. Because without the regulatory infrastructure, Dr. Jaewon Shin, who was the associate administrator from NASA for a long time, said, and I often quote him on this, is that without that infrastructure, without everything behind this, all these aircraft are a bunch of flying science projects. And that's the last thing we need, is to have industry put in so much money, resources, in developing these with nowhere to go and no public acceptance and no laws enabling it. So I think that's kind of what my focus has been on, and enabling this through the policy background, and it's been super exciting up to this point, and I look forward to talking a little bit more about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. So I think this might be the first panel in the last 6 or 7 months that has not mentioned the word COVID in the first half an hour. And I think that's pretty impressive. We are living in unprecedented times. Obviously, the aviation industry, airlines and airports are still waiting and hoping for things to fall into place and recover. So would love to start the conversation. And this will be a conversation, less of a Q&A. More of a conversation, so I encourage the panelists to question each other. But I'd like to start off going back to Purnima, who kind of touched on the people side of things. We're facing all these challenges, but folks like you always see opportunity within those challenges. And so how can organizations really position themselves as they look to kind of offset layoffs and loss of revenue, but also bring in that innovation and sustainability and look to the future while struggling through the mud, if you will, of the present. And then once she spends a minute or so, I'd like others to chime in with your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chris. There are so many thoughts, I'm just trying to channelize my thought and create an answer right now, because there are, one is that, we know that, you can't start being innovative when you have crises. You need to build that muscle in advance for a long time. And that's what my point was towards the end about investment, which was you cannot start. So the best thing, you cannot start, suddenly a big investment to change something suddenly because you have a problem. It is something you do consistently, even when you don't have problem. And if you look back,